Let's now start the second part of our own morning with interviews. Let's start with Roberto Gavazzi, CEO of the Bofi de Padova.
Allora, sei Roberto, benvenuto.
Roberto, welcome. Thank you.
Abbiamo parlato prima di te di varie tematiche.
Before your interview, we've talked about several trends. Do you recognize these trends on the market? Yes, for sure. As then, we have had a great year in 2021. We've had a quite good 2022. So two quite irreplaceable and irrepeatable years. 2023 is quite uncertain. 2024, who knows? Of course, the scenario is more complicated. However, I'm quite optimistic. We are small companies, even the larger ones are not that huge. Margins for growth are pretty high. We all have a potential for development in America and Asia, maybe not so much in Europe, but as for the growth trend, okay. As for the rest, of course, we all need to be larger, to be bigger, to be more retail-oriented. This need to communicate even better, to understand the value of e-commerce, how that matches with some of us who do not truly have a business in line with e-commerce. And just to frame your group, a couple of words on your group, because you talked about retail, you have a quite peculiar feature on that. Well, yes, we have shown a video which has nothing to do with the group, it's just products. But, well, the group, it started with Bofi when we started, and henceforward, I immediately wondered about how to keep a more product-oriented view or a more project-oriented view. And the idea of going for projects, well, that was very much appreciated. So with Buffett, we started with kitchens, wardrobes, bathrooms, but then going beyond, well, not so much a good idea, because I could not see Buffett producing sofas, even though you can do everything. Hence, we went out on the market looking for a connection with a company that was to be as strong as we were. And the Padova business, we cannot convince Maddalena de Padova we're not able to convince her for a few years. Then in 2015, we actually finalize that, because we could put two realities with a great history, with quite a similar view in terms of product, market, and way of behaving. And last but not least, ADL, connection system manufacturer, not so many doors, but much more, which is a quite interesting transaction because it allows using these systems, architectural partitions, to create very interesting spaces. So at the beginning, these three things together moved our view from a product view to a project view. So we have projects for the whole house all around. And we don't want to compete on the single product, even though we do sell even the single product, the single object, but we do try to offer a project, and our stores reflect this too. So stores, what's the weight of retail for you? That's quite a sales sector, but we are quite different. Well, I've always had a quite retail-oriented mind. They all hate me within the company, because when we have to buy a new machine, well, no, it's much better to open a new store and not buy a new machine. But the company has to be well-balanced. Our production is quite strong with Buffy. The Padova instead is not producing anything. But when we opened the first Buffy direct stores in the 90s, then from 2000 to 2012, well, we have opened most of those. We still have now 25 stores, and 150 million is our total sales. Half comes from retail. So these stores are very important. They play a major role, and I do devote much of my time to helping the stores. I do strongly believe in the retail model. You are in the upper tier, and possibly the company with the direct retail figure, which is the highest. What are the most critical issues and areas, and what are the benefits you see in this approach compared to a 100% approach? To colleagues, of course, I see, of course, don't copy what we are doing. Retail stores are terrible. Well, the most important issue is given by the human capital, which is paramount in our sector, because that's the most powerful and toughest retail segment worldwide. Our spaces are very large, productions are very large, products cost a lot, they are very difficult to resell, and the need for very valid talents is huge. But you cannot find these people everywhere. We have to actually grow them or take them from someone else. So this is fundamental and paramount. Fixed costs are a reality for all of us, because these realities have plenty of fixed costs. Hence, this is a job paying much attention to commercials. Our EBITDA is quite low. It has to increase, more linked to the kitchen world, which is a tough world to go. What's the weight of kitchens with you? Well, it's about 2/3, about 60% of our own job, and we hope the rest can grow. Yes, the rest should grow. This is more and more interesting, as a matter of fact. All the upholstery part in our own sector, well, that's totally different. It's a nice job with quite good margin and a higher flexibility. Well, I was seeing Buffy de Padova as a brand before, so all stores will be named after Buffy de Padova altogether, or you're going to have a main brand one day or another? Because, you know, the sector is somehow heading towards the simplification of brands. Well, we actually wanted to go for a paramount major brand to keep it forever and ever. Having this balance, striking this balance between a systems company with a different production job and the Padova on the other side with its great story and background, and we don't want to erase that. Actually, when I think about what to do, I always think about Maddalena, trying to understand whether she would appreciate or approve what we are doing. However, this is truly committed solution. It's not a melting pot with everything in there. That's actually the strategy which we believe is best for us. At least that's what's true for us. And again, quite typical in this sector is the contract segment. What's the weight of contract in your sector, and how does it locate within your own business? We are more kitchen-oriented, system-oriented, and our projects are house-wide. So contract, not e-commerce. Contract. No. As for contract, well, that's quite important, even though we are not contract-oriented. It's below 10% for us at the moment, and then there are quite erratic performances that can get to 15, even over. but we do want to keep it quite low on one side because we don't want it to invade the retail segment, which is to remain our own pillar. We have very sophisticated customers. The retail activity is never to be somehow conditioned by the contract activity, in addition to the fact that, as for contract, we are quite losing if our counterparty is not reasoning within a premium brand logic. So if the counterparty is not interested in us specifically, our costs are much higher. So let's say contract is a decision for you. You make depending on the single project. When the project is okay and in line with your business, yes, exactly. It needs to improve our own image. Otherwise, we don't go for contract projects because it takes much time. And retail, well, for this type of project, we do compete a lot with local carpenters and the different, or actually architects and operators, business operators having very valid local businesses producing pretty well. So you have to be ready to go for a very top-tier quality and service wherever you're working. And to do this, you need to have the perfect HR, which you cannot find that easily, to guarantee a very long-term service. We've been in some cities for lots of years, New York, Paris, London. We've been there for years now, 25 years. But then maintenance, servicing, customer service, that counts even more than the advertising campaign you can go for year after year. If you have well-maintained your network in the past, well, that's even more valuable. Because dealers can sell, but if dealers do not keep up with the past customer base, you will be happy in the market. So you have a very strong customer base, which is almost compulsory in the kitchen sector, upholstery, the same. Well, kitchen and wardrobes, you always have to be impeccable in whatever activity you go for. When you design, when you sell, and when you maintain for the future, even assemblies are fundamental. In some cases, our assemblies are pretty complicated. A stone wash basin, 800 kilos, which you actually put inside the flat with an air helicopter incoming, fitting before closing with the roof. It takes some 3 or 4 years with some customers to actually close a sale, because they do start with the kitchen design even before starting the architectural works in the house. And in 3 years, actually, well, that's a long time, because you might lose the customer there. He or she might actually find a different competitor promising whatever, this and that. So it's a pretty complicated job. But if you do that with value, it's much involving, and it generates a loyalty of players all around you, which is fundamental. And you talked about retail. You've been in some cities for over 20 years, so you have a history in your servicing. Is this fostering you in terms of repurchases? So when they have to replace it, just come to you without looking around? Is this your reality? Well, customers are having some pieces from our own collections do show these pieces, and this generates a customer base not only for the single customer, but that extends to family and friends, as we usually say. So servicing is fundamental. The quality of our own work is much connected to production, but we do all have wonderful productions. I could mention 30 companies manufacturing wonderful kitchens, but from that to saying how many companies can deliver to Sydney, Vancouver, Cape Town a product which is perfect the same way it's that the customer wanted with the top quality international network, well, there are not so many. So that's the reason why you have all these direct-owned stores. Well, yes, for sure, our own HR is actually trained on this. We do make Buffy injections day after day. It's a sort of induction we do perform every single day. You do not only create skills, you also create fun, enjoyment. You must love being part of this Buffy, the part of a family, which is a quite managerial family, actually. We are not so much a true family, we are a company anyway. Well, you talked about the structure, and you are quite peculiar. What about 3 years from now? How's the company going to be in terms of retail development figures? Would you want to have to? As for growth, even though double-digit is quite tough, but we want to go for a double-digit in-house, of course, no other way of doing. We've got quite used to doing that in the past few years, and we want to go for that too. As for the balancing, we want to extend towards, well, restarting better balancing our own sectors, and in terms of acquisitions and partnerships as we prefer them to be called. In our case, yes, they are acquisitions, but they are true partnerships. And when we started our transaction with the Padova, Luca de Padova did not sell his own reality for money, but he exchanged them with Buffy stakes, and he is still with us. He is the chair of his own reality. Paolo Buffy has always been with us. He has dismissed some of his stakes, but he actually had a role. ADL, the same. The entrepreneur is still with us with some stakes. So we are a group of companies where the valorization of the original entrepreneur is paramount, because it brings in the name, and he or she is the chair. So it's teamwork, let's say. Yes, teamwork. Paolo Buffy has retired, so I actually had to become the chair of Buffy. I left him with the honorary chair, even though he is not in the company anymore. But that's fundamental, because as you said before, job-related skills are fundamental. And as we've seen in many other cases, coming from different sectors does not allow for a perfect fitting into our own reality in all 100% of cases. Everyone believes that the sector is lagging behind, and we do truly need to do much more, no doubt about that. We are dwarfs. Our aggregate value is definitely dwarf compared to the great pillars in the sector, but we have to be more managerial. The sector is quite sophisticated, quite complicated, and the retail difficulty comes from also the view of the fact that actually people dismiss us. Thank you very much for this approach, and thank you for your presentation.